It literally doesn't make any sense. Let me break it down for you fellas. So basically MoltenMCI refers to the missing children's incident of 1985, where Afton put on the Spring Bonnie suit, lured 5 kids into the back of Freddy's, then killed them and stuffed them in the animatronic suits. You might be familiar with this. Skip a little down the timeline and William returns to Freddy's to dismantle the animatronics as we see him do in the FNaF 3 minigames. MoltenMCI suggests that the reason William did this was to harvest the remnant within the animatronic endoskeletons to make his funtime animatronics seen in sister location, which in turn would suggest the souls of the missing children are haunting the funtimes just as they did the originals. But there's one thing. No. Firstly, let's break down what actually happens in the FNaF 3 minigames. Shadow Freddy leads the classic animatronics to the back room, which they aren't allowed to enter, so they begin experiencing errors. Before turning back around, which is when Afton pops out to tear them apart like Kentucky Fried Chicken, come night 5, we play as a lost soul that chases Afton into the spring-locked suit sitting in the back room, and you know the rest. MoltenMCI suggests Afton in dismantling an animatronic at night, over the course of 5 nights, go figure, taking the male back to his underground bunker, then coming back to dismantle another until night 5. But notice how it's raining and thundering in each of these minigames, meaning Hurricane Utah is either taking its name literally, or these minigames are happening fairly subsequent to the last. We also never see him dismantle Golem Freddy, but considering Golem Freddy is nothing but a hunched over suit in FNaF 1, this fella probably doesn't even have an endoskeleton to dismantle. Although that does lead me to my next point, and that's some details about the animatronics here. I'll be honest, I never even noticed this until watching another YouTuber by the name of It's Fantasy, so props to her for pointing this out. Freddy and Bonnie here have buttons on their suits which the classic animatronics from FNaF 1 didn't have. But you know who did? The withered animatronics from FNaF 2, which are the same animatronics from the 1985 location. It's the smallest detail, but it actually helps us realize that these minigames take place before FNaF 1. In the newspaper at the end of FNaF 2, we see that the company is keeping the old characters in hopes of bringing back the brand eventually, even if it's on a smaller budget. It makes sense that the company might have used the old animatronics after fixing them up a bit, considering that they were working on a smaller budget this time around, meaning by the time of FNaF 1, old Willie is already spring-locked and sitting in a boarded-up safe room. It was probably William's dismantling that gave us the classic mascot suits we're so familiar with in FNaF 1, but how does this completely disprove MoltenMCI? Well, I can't claim to be a masterclass how Remnant works in FNaF, but I'm pretty sure I've gotten the basic rundown, i.e. I read some books and then I read the wiki to fill in the gaps. Remnant is basically the soul juice that makes up the souls inhabiting the animatronics in the series. It's a really weird concept that gives FNaF a sci-fi aspect nobody asked for, but it exists and it's a big part of the story. However, in the world of FNaF, you can have haunted objects without souls inside them. This is where Agony comes into play. Think of Remnant as the positive soul juice, whereas Agony is the mean and evil counterpart that can give life to objects without requiring a soul. Eleanor from the books is an example of this. There's a reason I bring this up, of course, and it's because... Okay, well, let me break it down for you again. William Afton goes to the FNaF 1 location to dismantle the animatronics, which in this case are actually the withered animatronics from FNaF 2. He gets spring-locked afterwards and is left to rot in a boarded-up safe room for 30-something years. The animatronics are rebuilt, now with fresh suits donning their endoskeletons. Sometime after, Michael Afton, whether he's been scooped or not is irrelevant in this case, works at the FNaF 1 location for a week before getting fired for tampering with the animatronics. During that week, he has to defend against Freddy and the gang because they like to take midnight strolls and forcefully stuff night guards into bear suits while they're at it. Notice how there's numerous instances where the eyes of the animatronics become completely black with white pupils. This is most likely a sign that these machines are in fact possessed, a trait shared throughout many of the animatronics in the early FNaF series. My point is that the FNaF 1 animatronics don't particularly act like agony-ridden creatures. I know that really wasn't a question people were asking, but I thought it would be a good point to build off of. Many of you, if not all of you by now, should know about Golem Freddy in FNaF 1. A poster of Golem Freddy's face will randomly appear in the hall right outside your door before he appears in your office, even if the doors are closed. He's most notable for doing this on night 5, but it's actually possible for him to randomly appear throughout the rest of the game. although in those events he doesn't PNG jumpscare you. In any case, you might also be familiar with the creepy imagery that appears on screen when Golden Freddy pops in. "It's me" should be a familiar phrase. This imagery can actually appear throughout the game even if Golden Freddy isn't around, but there's a reason I bring Golden Freddy up in particular. Note that we're playing as Michael Afton in FNaF 1, albeit under the alias of Mike Schmidt. Note how Michael's brother, the crying child from FNaF 4, is theorized to be one of the two spirits possessing Golden Freddy. Get where I'm going with this? The phrase "it's me" is the crying child telling Mike, "Hey yo, it's me, the kid you shoved into the jaws of a big yellow bear." I know what you might be thinking. Isn't it possible to have souls possessing animatronics while the remnant juice could be elsewhere? It's important to keep in mind that remnant sometimes varies depending on the source material, case in point being the original Silver Eyes trilogy, where remnant is depicted as the actual metal that the MCI victims reside in. However, in the games, it's more like an actual energy that Molten Freddy apparently has quite a lot of. Most likely because he's a little amalgamation of multiple animatronics that were pretty much designed for the collection of Remnant. Here's my next point. In the games, Remnant seems to be the substance that makes up these souls. It is the thing that binds them to inanimate objects, such as the animatronics. In the games, Remnant is not the metal itself, but what exists inside the metal. There's a reason I brought up Golden Freddy, and it's because he doesn't have an endoskeleton or any Oh, hello. There's a reason I brought up Golden Freddy in particular, and it's because he doesn't have an endoskeleton or any metal for William Afton to harvest. He's a slouched over suit. If he did have an endoskeleton, we'd see him walking around. With that in mind, there's something else I want to bring up, that being the Candy Cadet stories from FFPS. Something a lot of people bring up when talking about MoltenMCI is the Candy Cadet stories from Pizza Simulator, which have a running theme of 5 things becoming 1. When you take into consideration what happens to the Funtime animatronics at the end of the sister location, you can see why people would think that, but here's the thing. And to explain it, we'll be using basic math. Ballora, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, Circus Baby. That's 4 animatronics. We know Circus Baby is possessed by Elizabeth Afton, so that takes her off the table. But let's throw MoltenMCI a bone and say Bon Bon counts as an animatronic that could be possessed. However, judging on the blueprint we see in FNaF 6, Molten Freddy is specifically made up of the 3 other main animatronics in Sister Location. Therefore, Bon Bon is most likely just an extension of Funtime Freddy. But I know what you're thinking. Doc, we have precedent for multiple souls possessing one animatronic, an example being Golden Freddy. That's true, and in the books we have the Stitch Wraith, which is occupied by 2 souls as well. Here's the thing, and this is partly my opinion, but also something I think is worthy to keep in mind when theorizing about FNaF. We know almost for a fact that Golden Freddy has 2 souls residing in him. Things like UCN, the Security Logbook, and other books heavily suggest this. There isn't really anything suggesting that the Funtime animatronics themselves have multiple souls residing in one of them, or any of them at all. Circus Baby is very clearly possessed by Elizabeth Afton. Note the color change in Baby's eyes pre and post Elizabeth's death. Yes, these mechanical monstrosities eventually combine to form the eldritch beast known as Ennard, but that is very clearly depicted and inferred. If you're a little bit confused at what I'm trying to get at here, I'm trying to say that it doesn't really seem likely that the children from the 1985 incident could be haunting the Funtimes because... Number 1. There aren't enough Funtime animatronics in Sister Location for those souls to inhabit. Number 2. There's nothing indicating that there are multiple souls inhabiting any one of these robots. When I approach FNaF theory crafting, I look at the few facts we have and the generally agreed upon details and aspects sprawled throughout this series. The Stitch Wraith in Fazbear's Frights feels a lot like a Golden Freddy parallel, and then of course there's a logbook which seems to depict a ghostly conversation between 2 souls. We don't have any hints or a story from the books that shows us 2 ghost kids chilling out in Funtime Freddy. We have an emo chick that eventually gets decapitated inside Funtime Freddy, but not the former. There's one more aspect of MCI that I want to touch on, and once again it'll involve the Candy Cadet stories, and everyone's favorite subject, math! 5 things becoming 1. 5 things becoming 1. Ennard, right? Wait. Let's count. 1 little Susie, one little Jeremy, one little Gabriel, one little Fritz, one little Cassidy, one little crying child, one little Elizabeth. That's 7. Okay, but let's back it up here. MoltenMCI is typically in reference to the 5 missing children from 1985. It doesn't refer to the crying child and Elizabeth. To be fair, Elizabeth does get ejected out of Ennard after sister location, but that's after 5 things, quote-unquote, have become 1. But let's not get bogged down in the semantics. Let's say Elizabeth's exile doesn't matter in this case. What about the crying child, then? Never mind the fact we never see Afton dismantle Golden Freddy in those FNaF 3 minigames. At this point in the story, good old Fredbear here still has 2 souls occupying his costume. And considering we already talked about these minigames taking place before FNaF 1, we know the crying child is still kicking around in there by FNaF 1. I'd go as far to say that we know Cassidy is also still occupying Golden Freddy because of the security logbook. I know there's some debate around when Michael might exactly be writing in this book, but we know it has to happen post-sister location because of the sweet exotic butters he draws and the reference to Immortal and the Restless. We also know that Springlock suits had been outlawed by the company by the time of Mike writing in the logbook, and although we won't touch on it too much here, I think it's actually possible the Springlock suits were decommissioned when the FNaF 1 pizzeria was still open. That's another story, but you know, long story short, I think the logbook takes place during FNaF 1. So that was a lot to take in. Let's run it back real quick to more easily summarize. I don't think MoltenMCI works because, number 1, the animatronics that were dismantled in the FNaF 3 minigames were dismantled pre-FNaF 1's gameplay, but they still appear to be occupied by the missing children's souls come FNaF 1. Number 2, the soul of the crying child within Golden Freddy directly interacts with Mike through the It's Me messages. Number 3, Cassidy and the crying child are prominent in the security logbook, which very well might take place during FNaF 1's gameplay. Number 4, the number of missing children doesn't correlate to the number of runtime animatronics seen in sister location, and although it's possible for more than one soul to inhabit the same suit, there's no real evidence to suggest any of the funtimes have more than one soul possessing them. Number 5, although the Cadet story seemed to be in reference to Ennard with 5 things becoming 1, there are at least a total of 6 souls that would be inhabiting Ennard, which isn't even counting Elizabeth. Now I know it's not a perfect theory. As a matter of fact, it's less of a theory and more of a rebuttal against a popular theory. For starters, I know the argument could be made that maybe Afton didn't even touch Golden Freddy and only dismantled the 4 core animatronics. And if we say Bonbon counts as an animatronic, that lines up just a little bit more with Cadet's stories when you add Elizabeth into the mix. I'd point out the fact I mentioned previously, and that being how Elizabeth gets ejected from Ennard after sister location, and the details that suggest that FNaF 1 animatronics are still haunted by the spirits when the first game rolls around. Like almost everything in FNaF, nothing's ever certain. I can't say I have a perfect answer for what 5 things becoming 1 might be, possibly the 1987 dead child victims, but the fun times could just as well be possessed by a completely different / new set of kids. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. I actually really enjoyed making this, and doing this video reminded me of why I like diving into FNaF theory crafting so much. It really is like trying to figure out a mystery. And I know nowadays a lot of people have their gripes with the story and the direction security breach took, but for me I just try to enjoy FNaF for what it is. But anywho, thank you for watching, and I will see you never again.